Hello, sports fans. This is Steven here for JustMyPicks.com, and I'm bringing you a special in-depth breakdown of the NBA free agency special. I'm going to give you some of the big losers and the big winners so far into free agency. It's been action-packed. It's been almost fully a week since free agency started on July 1st, and it's been a lot of amazing news. You have to look at what's going on. The NBA is changing. This is no longer your father's NBA. This is no longer your mother's NBA that we've grown up to know. A lot of these teams are going to have to realize that a lot of the things that they used to use as far as tradition, winning championships, things like that, don't matter to these young players. The Boston Celtics are one of those teams that are enriched in tradition. They have a lot of traditions that are years and years old. So are the Los Angeles Lakers. We saw Dwight Howard walk away from the Los Angeles Lakers basically for nothing. So I want to focus on the key winners and the key losers going into next season. I'm going to start with the biggest winner of all, the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets picking up Dwight Howard, the best available free agent besides Chris Paul, because Chris Paul basically made it known he was re-signing with the Los Angeles Clippers. Dwight Howard last season was not healthy. I continue to tell people he wasn't 100% from back surgery. He also had labrum issues in his shoulder throughout the middle of the season. So we didn't see the Dwight Howard from Orlando. We didn't see him at his full potential. So all these people judging Dwight Howard and saying he's trash, he's garbage, all this. Lakers, you're lucky you had him for a season. If he was the healthy Dwight Howard we know from Orlando, you would have won at least one playoff game. Kobe Bryant going down towards the end of the season, right before the playoffs started, that didn't help the Los Angeles Lakers either. Having Mike D'Antoni as a coach didn't help either, but we're going to see Dwight Howard get healthy, him, James Harden. If Omar Sheik can get his brain together and think about him and Dwight Howard tag teaming as one of the best combinations for a starter/bench player, with a Sheik coming off the bench and possibly playing with Dwight Howard, it's going to be a lot of solid things down there in Houston. With the move that they made, I think that they become the second best team in the West. And I'm looking at this from the big picture because Oklahoma City, you don't know what they're going to be. The San Antonio Spurs, being the Western Conference champions, are going to be at number one because they have to get that bullseye off their back and be beaten before they can be dethroned from that number one spot. Oklahoma City goes to third, but Houston, having James Harden, having Chandler Parsons, who can spread the ball and shoot. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA, and Dwight Howard thrives when he has shooters around him that can shoot the three well and shoot the two also well. He can be a part of one of the best rebounding tandems in the NBA. Coming in at number two, the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors got Andre Iguodala, and I was very surprised. Yes, they lost Jared Jack. Yes, they lost Landry to Sacramento. But in the grand scheme of things, you're picking up someone who is another scorer, who can play defense well, who's a wing player, who you've been missing. You have Harrison Barnes, who potentially could be on the bench or even start. David Lee, who could possibly come off the bench or start, who is a walking double-double. Andrew Bogut, if he gets his situation together and he can stay healthy for a single season, Mark Jackson is looking at a loaded gun that he can use at his disposal. Klay Thompson Jr., also bright young man, has a very high IQ for basketball, can also shoot the three well. And of course, Steph Curry, if his ankles can stay healthy for a full season, watch out. The Golden State Warriors are a very, very dangerous team. We saw them come alive and Steph Curry become a superstar in front of our very own eyes in the Western playoffs, and it was just something to see. Moving on to the third winner, our third and final winner so far in NBA draft free agency, the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers got Doc Rivers, re-signed Chris Paul, signed shooters Jared Dudley and J.J. Redick. Last season, we saw the Clippers not be able to score inside or out. Chris Paul was the only guy that could make his own shot. Jamal Crawford, he didn't quite do it all the way. because a lot of times it was one-on-one basketball, and if you didn't hit the shot, it was a fast break going the other way. They didn't play with a lot of control. With Doc Rivers, he will force them to play defense. Doc Rivers will hold each and every player accountable. Chris Paul will do the same. Chris Paul will have everyone in line doing that and bettering himself. Because Doc Rivers is a master motivator and a great coach, you have to look at what he can do in a bigger sense. And I'm sure playing with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, now adding Jared Dudley and JJ Redick to the mix, having people and the veterans that they have on that team, sky's the limit for this team. So I'm looking at the final winner being the Los Angeles Clippers. Now let's start on the losers. Go across the hallway to the Los Angeles Lakers. Losing Dwight Howard for nothing hurt the Lakers. I know they gained cap space and yada yada yada, but you gave up Andrew Bynum, a 7-footer, for a 6'10 / 6'11 7-footer in Dwight Howard, which walked out your door basically a couple states over to Houston. So my thing is, a lot of people talk about how Kobe Bryant's going to bounce back and Paul Gasol's going to bounce back. You still have the same problems, LA. You don't have any cap space. You don't have a good coach. D'Antoni's not a good coach on defense. He barely is a good offensive coach, because we've seen last season the Phoenix system didn't quite work. You know, when you have so many injuries, you don't have players that fit the scheme. And having Paul Gasol, still baffles me. Having Paul Gasol and Dwight Howard and sitting Paul Gasol on the bench is idiotic. And D'Antoni made a lot of mistakes having Dwight Howard, because you can have two of the best big men in the game on the floor at the same time. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Lakers. They just, wow, disappointing. Coming in at number 2, the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz lost Al Jefferson and Paul Millsap, 2 quality big men that in the NBA, you're looking for big men. You're looking for guys who can rebound. They've been a figure in Utah for so many years that they were bound to leave. You know, when Darren Williams left, the writing was on the wall. They played out their contracts there. Of course, Al Jefferson going to the Bobcats and Millsap going to the Atlanta Hawks. I think the Atlanta Hawks got a big pickup. So did the Charlotte Bobcats for that, because both these guys are space eaters. Both these guys can shoot the ball relatively well back to the basket, 15 to 17 foot jump shots, and both these guys play defense. So both those teams got solid pickups, but the Utah Jazz are the big losers out of this. And when it comes to one of the biggest losers this offseason, the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons were so eager to spend money this offseason. Spent it on Josh Smith. Josh Smith is a solid NBA player. Last year we saw career highs for him in points, but we also saw Josh Smith have to play without having another superstar beside him, like Joe Johnson. Having Al Horford didn't really affect them, good or bad, but I just can't say enough. The Pistons overspent, and the Pistons were so desperate to spend money to get a draw to their place that they overspent for Josh Smith. Because Josh Smith on his team with Andre Drummond and Greg Monroe, you have the same players. It's almost like they're the same player. So for me, when you have those center / power forwards that can go as a hybrid, as a small forward, Josh Smith, you don't really have somebody that's going to lead this team. Josh Smith, yes, he balled out in a couple of games in Atlanta. Yeah, he can dunk, but besides that, what direction is your team going in? Yes, you hired Mo Cheeks as your head coach and Rasheed Wallace as an assistant, but what are you really trying to say? What are you really doing in the grand scheme of things? Since Chauncey Billups and Rasheed and them left as players, you haven't really been on the map anymore. You've been one of the NBA's worst franchises since then, and you haven't made the playoffs ever since. So this is one of the reasons why I picked the Detroit Pistons as one of the worst off seasons that they're having during the free agency. I think they misspent their money. Again, if you feel like there's a team in the NBA that I missed, why don't you make a list, good or bad, winners and losers. Also, check me out at justmypicks.com. Also, follow me on Twitter at justmypicks.tv. Also, check me out on this video and all my other videos on YouTube / justmypicks.tv. Thank you very much for commenting, and please subscribe.